Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mind, Body, Musings podcast. My heart is racing right now. I am filled with so much delight and excitement to be here with the one and only Richard Rudd, who I have been enamored and fascinated by for the past, I would say, 5 months. During this quarantine, coronavirus deep dive, I've had plenty of space and time to be diving into some of the things that I've heard about but didn't get to create much space. And the gene keys was one of those things. My friend a year ago had told me about them. I remember being in her bedroom. We were drinking wine, talking about boys. And then she was like, oh my God, now we got to talk about this really amazing thing I found called the gene keys. She pulled out her book, found my profile. I was a little bit overwhelmed. We were probably one bottle deep into the wine. And so I didn't revisit it until during this quarantine when I met someone who has been studying this work for, I think, 9 years now, told me all about this amazing man named Richard Rudd, who had this deep download of this thing called the gene keys. And we're going to go into that today. But before we do so, I want to read his fabulous bio. A teacher, mystic, and poet, Richard Rudd attended Edinburgh University, where he gained a master's degree in literature and metaphysics. A born explorer, he has studied with great teachers in the East, traveled through the Himalayas, the Pacific, the Americas, and the Arctic. He worked in the film industry in Australia, so cool, trained as a teacher of Qi Kung and meditation in Thailand, amazing, and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean on a small yacht, fabulous. Throughout his adventures, Richard has explored his love of writing, and in 2006, he won the Fish International Poetry Award in Ireland. Richard's mystical journey began early in life as he experienced strange energies rushing throughout his body. This catalyzed his spiritual search. All his studies became synthesized in 2002 when he began to write and receive the gene keys, a vast synthesis exploring the miraculous possibilities inherent in human DNA. So cool. It took 7 years to write the book and understand its teachings and applications. Today, Richard continues to study and teach the profound lessons contained in the gene keys. Welcome to the Mind, Body, Musings podcast, Richard.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
All right. So as we begin our slowing down of the deep dive that we're going to have today, I'm assuming that there are quite a few people who are still unfamiliar with the gene keys. And what's particularly piquing my interest as a starting point is that experience of the download and your state of samadhi that you went into when you, sorry, my Siri thinks I'm talking to her. That's
when
not
you
what
said
I
samadhi.
I said samadhi. That experience, and then what led to the creation of the gene keys. And I would love to hear in your words what the gene keys are.
Yeah. Well, as you said, everyone uses the word download nowadays, don't they? It is quite a good way to describe what happened to me. But essentially, I entered into an experience of a higher consciousness in which I guess the best way to describe it is I felt no resistance in my being at any level, and I felt all the pain had gone, all the memory had gone of the past. I was just in the field of light with no resistance in my body, in my being anywhere. So I was just this pristine awareness of light streaming through me, this intelligence of light. And it wasn't catalyzed by anything, especially. I was in a deep process of contemplation over many months, working with the Kabbalah, actually. But I worked with many systems of, deep contemplation. And anyway, so that experience happened. It lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. And I guess I could have gone anywhere, in those days. It's like the universe was open to me. I could have gone anywhere. I could have explored anything I wanted. And so I followed my the inner will within me. It just followed it. And and I didn't really even do anything. I just received what came, and it's difficult to put into words what came, but I think what I what was really transmitted to me was, this is my dharma, this is my destiny. You know, I saw my destiny, I saw why I was here. I kind of remembered it rather than seeing it. I sort of remembered it in the cells of my body. It was a very physical experience. And in that, it was a bit like I got a complete symphony downloaded in one go. And maybe like Mozart received a symphony or heard a symphony. And then you have to sit down afterwards and then write it out, you know, like get the paper out and your pen, and then go like, okay, let's write the music, and then we can find the orchestra later, you know. And so it's a bit like that for me. I kind of received this universal wisdom that was as old as time itself, that others have also, countless of others have seen and accessed. And yet I was accessing it through my specific lens and my culture and my archetypes and I guess my soul's essence. And so for me, I kind of, it was a set of teachings I received, but I didn't really know that at the time, you know. And after 3 days and 3 nights, the journey kind of had a natural closure. And I went on a journey actually in those 3 days throughout Great Britain. I followed a kind of path, and then I came back down off that kind of mountain, and I had to sort of make sense of what had happened to me. And it took me years, you know, years to understand and to integrate that experience. And it only later kind of became the gene keys, you know, as I started, and I've been working with lots of other systems, as I said, the Kabbalah and you know, like many of us, I explored the chakras and the Hindu systems and all of that. And I traveled extensively in my 20s. Anyway, so I had all this kind of worldly sort of knowledge that I'd gained, but you know, I was still pretty immature in many ways, emotionally especially, and so my training then kind of began after that experience. And I had a family. I met my wife, and we had a child, and that journey began. And inside my family, this teaching started to come alive. And really it came alive for me because I needed it, right? Suddenly I had responsibilities. I was no longer this free kind of floating young man traveling the world and exploring consciousness. Suddenly I had responsibilities and a wife and emotional kind of challenges and a child, and you know, we had to build a home and all those sort of things. And it was hard. This has a lot of, you know, there's all these tough things you face, especially with a couple and a young child. Like it's tough. And so I dived into the teachings that I'd been given, and that's where they came from. They came like, I need help. It's like, because how do I incorporate spiritual teachings and physical, emotional responsibilities of being a human, you know, and how do I do that? And so all of the teachings of Gene Keys that have emerged since then have come from, I think it's important for people to understand, they come from a family setup. I now have 3 children, and we're still, you know, humming along together. We're still deeply devoted to my wife and my children, my family. And somewhere in the middle of that, I wrote the Gene Keys book, you know, great big thick book that kind of detailed, you know, we can unpack that in a minute, but it was like out of that came the teachings, because it was like in that book, I kind of in coded form condensed those 3 days in some way. I can't even say how or why, but somehow in that book I encoded the signature in light, in a light language of what happened to me in those 3 days. And then I've been unpacking that ever since, because it's spawned its own set of teachings and a community, and other books have grown out of that book that add layers and tapestries, and now the Gene Keys is a whole sort of spiritual journey. Yeah. So that's the introduction.
The layers are so deep in this beautiful book. When you say that it was 3 days that you went into the higher consciousness, were you asleep? Were you walking? Were you talking? Were you functioning? What was your like daily, what did your daily functioning as a human being look like in that kind of higher consciousness
I was just,
trance?
yeah, I was on a, it was a, what emerged for me was a kind of quest, you know. It was like I was living in the normal, you know, I was living normally, but I didn't know I had 3 days ahead of me. You know, I was just like responding to the light inside me. And it literally kind of said, sit still, or it said, go out for a walk, or it's not like it spoke to me. It was just an impulse that moved through me. Anyway, it took me on a journey throughout England where I live. And I had adventures on the journey. I met people on the journey, strangers, you know, and I followed kind of what we call in England ley lines. You know, I did, you know, I was following, I guess the Aborigines call them song lines. You know, they're the lines of energy that run through the earth, and they contain memory. And so I was traveling down these, it was a bit like I was walking in the footsteps of the master, you know, and I followed these footsteps, and they kind of, wherever my feet fell, that was there was a revelation that came. And so I learned from the land, I learned from nature, I learned from people I met, I learned from, you know, at one point I found myself in a wedding. and in the wedding, I learned about the marriage of yin and yang and the opposites, and the real core meaning of alchemy, of the yin and the yang, because I saw everything from a much higher perspective, and I understood how humanity has kind of built itself on the higher truths without realizing. You know, I went into churches, I experienced the understanding of the church, the layout of churches, a Christian church, you know, the understanding of what Christ brought. Wherever I went, something was revealed to me, you know, from the deep mysteries, the hidden secrets behind life, you know, behind every plant, or, you know, a dog. Or at one point I went to a crop circle, you know, that I'd never been to a crop circle before. And that one appeared that, you know, I was in a shop, for example. I don't tell the story version, but I was in a shop getting some cufflinks to go to this wedding, because I'd hired this shirt to go to this wedding that I'd been invited to. Suddenly, it was spontaneous. And I was getting these cufflinks, you know, from a shop. And the person in the shop said, just spontaneously said, have you heard about this crop circle? I was like, you know, I was in a kind of clothes shop in a town in England, and I was kind of taken aback. But I wasn't, because I was in the field. So I was surprised by nothing. So this guy said, yeah, crop circle. And I was like, no, I don't know. What is that? And I knew what they were, I'd heard. And he said, well, it's come in a field near here. It's just appeared in the morning. He was obviously interested in these things. So I said, I'd like to know about that. I'm gonna go there. So anyway, I went to this crop circle, and it appeared the night before, and it was the Double Helix Dna. You know, it was quite a famous one. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was only there for a few days, and I was one of the very first people to go into it and to walk through it. It was huge. It was huge across a field, this whole helix. And I was like, I didn't know what the relevance of that was. I didn't know what gene keys were or any of that. Like that was like a decade away at least. But there was a whole journey, and ended up with me being in North Wales, and having, you know, on a remote island, and that's where it ended. So it was a mythic quest I went on, in which coded secrets were revealed to me at every turn. And it was amazing.
What's really beautiful about that is it's the embodiment of living in the world, and learning the lessons that you definitely needed to learn. Like this consciousness needed to give you all of these things so that the gene keys would be born, but it's not what so many people imagine being transcendent would be, being in silence and stillness. It's actually interacting with the world. And it reminds me a little bit of Jim Carrey in the movie Yes Man, where he just says yes, and that leads to one thing to the next, and
very similar. I
I
mean, I certainly had moments where I was contemplating and meditating, but it was essentially it was a journey. And essentially, and really it was at night when I went into that stillness, you know, because in the night the light didn't stop. sleep didn't come. And so I was just sitting in the light field then, for hours and that was when I went more into the formless dimensions.
I'm really interested in how your brain works, like in regards to this contemplation and stillness. Like, I, for myself, might be thinking about 5 different things at once, and then grab a piece of paper to take all these notes, and then want to come over here and maybe I'll learn about gene keys or watch this Mary Magdalene video or write a blog. Like, so many things are trying to be born at once. And contemplation, you have a book called The Art of Contemplation, and that was one of the first things I bought, even before the Gene Keys books.
Oh, good.
Books, I was like, ooh, this feels right. Because one of my favorite quotes or ways to live is just this simple reminder of let's slow down. Let's slow down because that's not the way I naturally am. So that's been one of my life paths to me, is this art of slowing down. And so when I found The Art of Contemplation, I was just, my body just breathed this huge sigh of relief of, yes, this is the way to learn, to grow, by being still and contemplating something. Where you say it's in between meditation and concentration. Is that right? Yeah. So when it comes to, let's even talk about you writing this book for 7 years, how were you able to go at a pace that allowed the gene keys to be born without, tightening the corset really tight and try to make it work? And because you had a flow, I'm assuming, to writing this book, and it didn't have to be a certain way, which is why it's so beautiful. So has that always been natural to you, that way of thinking and living?
I think so. I think since that kind of intelligence was revealed inside me, to me, through me, I realized that, to really access deep veins of truth, you cannot rush. You cannot be in a pressured way at all. You've got to be loving. You've got to be gentle. You've got to romance wisdom. It's it's that romantic story of the man romancing the woman. That's kind of fairy tale, and it can be the other way around, of course, the woman romancing the man. It's just that's the kind of patriarchal view maybe, but it's about romancing the yin, because the mystery is the yin, the divine feminine, and you can't kind of run in clenched, bullish. So you have to sit back and kind of open your heart and invite it in, and it comes in layers then. And wisdom, I experience, opens in layers because the heart opens in layers. That it's very rare that the heart suddenly opens. Like, sometimes that happens, like when we fall in love, for example. And yet, for most of us, like, to open our heart, it's like to trust in another person or in something. We need layers. The heart needs time, the intelligence of the heart. And so I think that's how we access wisdom, in the same way, like in these layers. So as I wrote the Gene Keys book, it was through a long process of contemplation that got deeper and deeper and deeper. And I also enjoy the mystery. So I didn't have like, because there's 64 chapters, because there's 64 codes in our DNA, right? That's why it's called Gene Keys. And each one has 3 levels. And first of all, I had to come up with the 3 words for each of, so if I take I got the book, so I'll just open it randomly. Yeah. You can do it like that. It's quite fun. So here I've got 39th gene key. This is my wife's gene key, actually. So the shadow is provocation, and the gift is dynamism, and the siddhi, which is the highest level, is liberation. So you have these 3 words, these 3 realms. And what a gene key represents is it's like an encyclopedia of an aspect of consciousness. So when you go in through this code, you're going into, this is encoded in all things. Anything that's alive, and even the inanimate, is encoded with these keys, right? and there are 64 of them. And the DNA operates according to 64 codes, and nature operates according to 64 codes. It's a tetrahedral structure that's at the heart of all existence, right? So it's like, this is the holographic language and patterning of consciousness itself. But the gene keys particularly apply them to humans, so that we can kind of access, well, what does it mean psychologically, spiritually, emotionally? That's why you get those words, you know, provocation, dynamism, and liberation. So the shadow, which is the kind of the energy it begins with, is the energy that's chaotic, that hasn't yet kind of crystallized inside us, is provocative. It's like, that's a provocative gene key. It's a provocative code. And so something that provokes us, it can either be a positive thing or a negative. It could provoke us to awaken. That's why the siddhi, the highest, is called liberation, because liberation is something that's provoked in us. You know, something pushes us, you know, and it pushes us towards, you know, learning more or growing more. And all life does that. Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's very creative. It's like, if you sit still for long enough, something will come and poke you, you know, and you'll get up, and how you respond to that is, it dictates whether you reinforce the shadow. So if you are provoked in turn, then you'll get caught in a shadow game, you know, with your partner, let's say, you know, so they provoke you, you react, you provoke them, they react, you're in a kind of a struggle, a conflict. And then, but underneath that provocation is dynamism, right? So the gift of it is, it gets you up, it gets you moving, it stops you being stagnant. So the 39th gene key is a very like energizing code, because it wakes us up. And then if you could harness that dynamism, instead of reacting to the provocation, you can respond creatively. And then you're in a dance with that person. You know, you may challenge their behavior, but you'll challenge it out of a place of empowerment rather than a place of victim. You know, because if you react, then you're a victim of the provocation, you know, because you're caught by it. You know, if you react in a low frequency way, as I call it. So it's about raising the frequency. That's what each gene key does inside us. It gives us the opportunity to rephrase the language of life. And then ultimately it's it's about liberation. So all, you know, regardless of what gene keys you have connected to because Gene Keys is a journey that has a profile, right? So as you know, so you can go online to genekeys.com and you can get your free profile, and you can see which keys relate to your awakening, and to your relationships, and to your, you know, ability to prosper in life, and to your purpose. You know, we have keys for all those things that relate to us. So there's a code in there. There's something to play with. There's an adventure and a quest. Like my love of quests, out of the Gene Keys, I created quests. So everyone can go on this quest, and it's your quest, you know, as you've been like exploring it, right? So yeah, a long answer, but I can't even remember what the question was. But anyway, we've gone on a journey into the keys themselves. That's how they work.
That's one of the things there's so many reasons why I resonate with this, but I love the mythical and the quest and the journeys. It feels like I'm in some type of fantasy world almost. It brings a playfulness to this kind of work. And just to recap what you said, you have this shadow side. There's the shadow, there's the gift, there's the siddhi, which is the highest gift. And I also love all this because shadow work has been something really profound in my life, of playing with the shadow. And so I'm putting together these pieces of what I've learned in my tantric studies around taking your shadow and creating art out of it. And then, I just got goosebumps. Yeah, and so then I'm relating to how the Gene Keys work, of taking your shadow and it actually being the thing to take you into the siddhi, into that higher gift. So I wanted to tell you something that's really fascinating. My life's work, if you go to my website, you will see all over it says the word devotion. Devotion, devotion, devotion. My life's work is 29, which is devotion, and the shadow side is half-heartedness. And inside of your book, there's this one part, I was reading it yesterday and my mind was blown. There was this one part that you wrote in that chapter, because for everyone listening, this is all about being like a divine drunk, being so drunk on your love for God, for like love above all, for beauty, for like just this wonderful heart breaking sensation we have of living in this world. What's beautiful, what's tragic. And that's what I'm so called to do. And in this chapter, you wrote something like, okay, I'm just going to read it. You wrote that people who do this, who have this gene key, the 29th city remains deeply immersed in human relationships. Yep. In many tantric practices, the devotee visualizes him or herself having sex with the divine consort. I literally do that. I have practices where I'm like imagining I'm making love to Shiva and feeling my heart opening from that Shiva kind of love and divine Jesus. And yeah, I just thought that was really freaking cool. Like how specific these chapters can be. And that's just one of the gene keys that I have in my profile. And it gives me, it's just been this really nice anchor when I'm going into the shadow of half-heartedness. Because also when I look at my life, it's been a lot of, picking up and going. Like leaving a home very quickly without saying goodbye to my friends that I made, or jumping from project to project and being too little committed or overly committed, and very rarely in between, which is why quarantine has been so great, because I've had less opportunities to commit myself to. So I've been able to kind of clean that slate and see, what do I really want to be committed to in life.
Beautiful. I guess it also means, because if you have 29, it means you also have 30, because that's the opposite. So so your work is really about, the transmutation of desire, the desire nature in humanity. And that's not just sexual desire, it's all desire. And like, really, that's your life. It's like, how, understand desire, like trust it, learn from it, see what's hidden inside it. And there's so many riches, but also it will take you, and as you will probably already know, as most of us know, it'll take us into some pretty wild areas of consciousness. It will take us into parts of ourselves that we don't like, or mistakes that we think are mistakes because we followed a desire. And I know it's been, I've learned, we all learn from our desires, and that's a hell of a journey. So good one.
Yeah. So we have a mutual friend, Alan. Everyone listening to this, you don't need to know who Alan is. He's just an awesome guy. And me and him spent this morning, we had like an hour-long convo. He didn't know I was going to have this interview with you. And so he called me and he was like, oh, okay, let's talk about Richard. Here's some things you should ask. Here's some ideas of things you can ask. And so he really pushed me to bring that gene key up and look at a specific around this, because I think a lot of people, what I think of is attachment styles when I'm thinking of the 29th gene key and the 30th, of anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. And I'll speak for myself. I experience that a lot, of being anxious with an avoidant lover, or being avoidant with an anxious lover. And my avoidant is the strongest one, half-heartedness, kind of, and desire for something else. I desire to be in a more open situation, or I desire to be more, someone who gets me better, or this. And so it leads me to disassociating or kind of putting up a guard. And then the devotional practices that I have that are, quote, my life, just go out the window. Stop believing in like this and loving this higher essence of love available at all the time. I stop the eye gazing. I stop all these things that I love, because my wall becomes so thick. And so he just wanted me to bring that up, of asking, and especially, and you have this wonderful deep dive into the Venus path, which is all about love and romance and relationships. And I'm sure we'll have a second podcast diving deeper into that. But I guess my question, if I was to formulate one around this, is what's that balance between leaning into your shadow and knowing that it's healthy and healing versus being a martyr and going deeper into your shadow when it's actually you're beyond the expiration date of something, you know, or and I'm not talking specifically about my life here, to be clear, but
Yeah.
this is something that's come up over and over in my life of I should stay, I should keep leaning into this. And now knowing my gene key of, you know, half-heartedness of wanting to book it, this is what I'm contemplating right now.
And it's a great question. It's a great one. And, you know, there's no sort of hard and fast answer to it either. I think that those are our edges. Those are particularly now, those are our spiritual edges of learning from our relationships. Because, you know, I've been in a relationship for at least 20 years now. And, you know, it's not always a pretty thing, you know, it's like but it's like, you know, if you're digging a well, if you dig lots of shallow wells in lots of different places, you'll never reach the water table. And if you find a person who's willing to go the distance, like dig your well there, as long as they are essentially kind, you know, in their core, then you know, that's actually enough. I mean, I actually sometimes I kind of wonder about the Indian process of the arranged marriages, and even though to us in the West it seems like terrible, I kind of understand where they were coming from. Now it depends what you've got, you know, but in a way, looking at it from a very spiritual perspective, you know, a kind of yin and a yang coming together, whatever sex or gender they are, like two people coming together, that is a cauldron. That's an alchemical cauldron. And if you dig that well and you go on digging, eventually you're going to reach some really profound places, and you're going to reach rocks as well. You're going to reach hard rock at times. And, you know, even after 20 years, you still reach places of hard rock. And you're like, oh my God, not this place again. And you have to sort of just wait. It's like the water kind of finds its way around the rock. And it's like, you need a lot of patience, and you need a lot of, you know, self-forgiveness and love and gentleness towards yourself and the other, in order to kind of realize, is this kind of, you know, is this going to work long term? You know, because I openly have an agenda when I talk about relationships, because I recommend people they stay with one if they can find one. If there's abuse in it, I would be very, you know, anyone should be careful. And there's emotional abuse, and then there's physical abuse. If there's physical abuse, you just need to get out straight away, or see someone, get help, support. If there's emotional abuse, that's also kind of a very tricky area, and it can be worked with support, with the support from someone who really knows the terrain. And sometimes it can't be, you know, so that's a journey for each person, you know, because we each have moments where we abuse the other. We abuse ourselves. We're like, you forget yourself. You know, every now and again, I kind of lose my temper. It doesn't happen very often, maybe kind of once or twice a year. You know, something triggers me and I just, dang. And I don't give myself a hard time about it anymore. I kind of go, oh, look, that's one of those kind of strange attractor events. I wonder what like is going to come out of this one. And yeah, I mean, but I've been at it a long time, and I've been contemplating a long time. And so I've softened and softened and softened. And that's one of my revelations that's come through being in a relationship with this teaching, is that if you can really harness the energy, it's like the one that I opened the book on, there's no mistakes, you know, like provocation. Someone that provokes you is a really wonderful gift. You know, if they can go on provoking you, what a gift that is. Because if you can get to a place where you're unprovocable one day, then you're liberated. And that's the goal, right? And we all do that to each other. The longer you live with someone, the more you realize that. But also, if you're doing the work, then you're softening. Because as I said, the heart is about softening and forgiving and yielding. And you know, and you have to just your heart just teaches you those lessons. You know, like the amount of times I have kind of pushed myself to go and issue an apology when I know that it wasn't my fault, you know. But like someone has got to make that step, and I'm like, you go and make that step, you know. It's like, even though you're, you know, and you have to wait until you're able to make that step, and then you kind of overcome the energy in you that's still in provocation. And then you suddenly those words come out, and sometimes it doesn't work either because you're there too early, you know. And there's an inauthenticity because you want it to be over quicker than it actually is, you know. And then you get another slap back, you know, and you're like, the energy's still there, and it's not the other person, it's the chemistry field, you know. You can't blame the other person. It's the chemistry between you that's provoking you both to awaken to something, you know, to awaken to deeper love and forgiveness. So if you can find a solid person to be with for a decent amount of time, and 7 years is a kind of minimum for a cycle of deep learning, then, you know, that's a gift and a half. You know, if you can throw children into the mix as well, that's like, you know, accelerates your learning by another tenfold, you know. It's like,
I bet.
But that's not essential, you know, especially in today's world. I would consider carefully about bringing a child into the world. So, yeah.
Well, my longest relationship has been, I think, 1.5 years.
Yeah, well, you know.
So I feel that 7 year, there's something in my body that's like, I'm ready to go deep.
Yeah.
And
wonderful.
It feels like there's some symbolism around my name meaning high tower. And you're talking about wells. Like, I've been going up and up and up, and like, there's nothing wrong with having separation in life, but
no.
I'm going deep into the earth as I go deep up.
And many people learn, you know, we all are different. So that's just my agenda, and I own it. You know, it's like there are other teachers that just say, follow, you know, willy-nilly follow your desire, and you'll learn regardless, even if you're moving from one to another. And so everyone learns differently in different ways at different paces. So it's really important to kind of know that. And everything is for our learning and for our hearts opening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said something I thought was really interesting on a podcast recently. You said that you believe everyone is going to be reincarnated again. Because, and I kind of quote you, I'm going to paraphrase a bit, but you said the divine isn't cruel, and that the divine wants you to see the fruits of your labor and see where we're going. I thought that was really beautiful. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah. Just to clarify, I probably didn't say everyone will reincarnate, but it's like,
yes, most.
But what I did draw attention to is that many people in our kind of interested in spiritual knowledge get into a certain mindset where they would like this to be their last life, or they feel like this is their last life. And whether that may or may not be true, sometimes when you dig a little deeper into that, you have the realization that the reason you're saying that is because you're not enjoying this one very much. And actually the last life is it would be a life of such glory, you know, of such finesse, of such elegance. You know, it could be very humble. It doesn't need to be public in any way, but a life of such joy and completion. And it really so that really tells you like where you're at. So I just like invite people who have those questions just to look inside and go, well, maybe I have a little more to do than I actually thought, and let's be real about that. And because I've explored this. I'm still exploring this journey of the reincarnating soul this year. I'm particularly been really thinking about it this year and contemplating it. And a lot of memories and revelations have come to me, and understandings about how it works. And I'm kind of wondering what to do with all that knowledge. I haven't kind of shared it yet, so I think it's probably for the future. But what I've realized, and it's what I saw in my 3 days, is there's a perfection to the universe that is just so beyond anything we can comprehend. There's a perfection in every moment, and the timing of every moment, the people we draw into our life. That is the perfect person that's standing in front of you for right now, for the teaching, for the awakening, for the lesson. And even really difficult, really horrendous experiences are also, in their kind of core, they are the perfect teaching for the soul of that being at that time. But we can't always see that at that time. And it may be that some of us only ever see it even after death, because there are mysteries hidden in the world and in the cosmos, in nature. And, you know, the nature of suffering that, you know, that is so deep on this planet. Like we're here to learn from suffering until we've learned everything that she has. I call her she, I don't know why. Everything that she has to teach us. And I don't anthropomorphize it, this is the woman, or like, you could say it, you know.
But you're talking about suffering as a
It's
she?
the divine, like, because the divine, well, it's the divine mother that's behind. It's grace that lies behind suffering. But but you don't see that until you've gone so deep into it. Like, and then you see the grace. It's like someone you really love dies, and you only really kind of understand that relationship at that level after they've died, often, you know, like, because then they're kind of released, and then the deep spirit of who they are is suddenly felt in a way that is different from when they're alive, you know. So you know, I do not in any way make light of suffering. And I also don't, you know, I know it's a thing that we're here to learn from until we've learned from it. And I think that our next epoch, as it opens for humanity, will not be from suffering. It will be learning from bliss, actually. That's the next level. But both have a lot to teach us, you know, and we can't attain to the bliss until we've really understood the suffering in depth, you know. And it's not something, therefore, we should be afraid of. That's why the Gene Keys always starts with the shadow, you know, because the shadow, as you said, is like, that's the shadow work, is like, it can't be bypassed, you know. And but also it doesn't need to be like, it doesn't need to become our identity either, you know, which it does sometimes. People get so lost in it, because there's a lightness also needed. I think everything is a balance, and Gene Keys teaches this. It's a balance. Like, there needs to be a sense of play, even when there's difficulty, you know, especially when there's difficulty. I loved that you started by saying that you were drinking a glass of wine and talking about the Gene Keys, because that it's sort of symbolic to me of what, you know, wine is symbolic of that kind of, you know, love of appreciation of the senses and the sensual, and life, and being in a body. And isn't it beautiful being in a body? And I'm coming back to your question, which was the reincarnation of, you know, when you come back, you know, what's being created right now in this world is a glorious future. This is the other thing that was revealed to me in my 3 days. Like, I was shown this future memory of the future human, and it just filled me with like, oh my God, if humans knew this, if humans knew this, they would just feel so different about life now. They wouldn't worry so much about the world and where it's going. In fact, they wouldn't worry at all. And I don't worry about where the world's going. Not since I had that experience, because I've seen where it's going. And so for me, it's like, in order to make a breakthrough of the level that we're going, we have to go into the kind of cyclone. We have to go into the whirlwind. We have to go into this cataclysmic energy of the world shadow and pierce it and shatter it. And then we get to experience, like you said, the fruits of our labors, you know, on the other side. So this is a time you want to come back to, you know. So we're all building something. All of us collectively are building something magnificent right now. But we can't see it yet. You know, some of us can feel it coming. And in order for it to come, we have to move into this shedding period, you know, in which a lot of fear comes up, because a lot of the structures that we've built that we hold dear need to kind of fall away in our societies. And that means a lot of fear and perhaps increased suffering for a while for humanity, in order that we can purge us. You know, it's not like in order that we go through this kind of birth canal, you know, it's a birth canal, and it has these contractions, you know, these pulses, like a pandemic is a pulse, you know, and, you know, there are pulses of like themes as the toxins get pulled out of humanity. And then there's a rest and the next layer. And if you build reincarnation and the whole rebirth cycle into this, there's a lot less fear, because in the next phase of our evolution, you know, what I see is we will retain memory between births, you know, so that we kind of, there's no longer this fear of death that kind of haunts us, and we have a sense of long continuity, you know. So we can build something that we can then reincarnate back into and continue building it. And we also can be co-creative and participate in our rebirth process, you know, instead of kind of not knowing, you know. And there's a whole journey behind that. I mean, it's something I wish to be sharing more with people and teaching out of that, because there are ways we can exit that kind of really are beautiful, you know. And some people, if you've been with someone that dies really well, then you realize that like there's a real grace in terms of, I had a friend died this year recently, and he and I talked a lot about rebirth together in the period coming up to his death, and he really set his trajectory, you know. He knew where he was going. He didn't know the specifics, but he knew the energy, and he took it with him, and he left behind, you know, this beautiful legacy. And then he dove into that light, and knowing where he was going to come back, you know, not specifics, but he knew that he would be coming back into that field and continue the work that he'd started.
Wow.
And so he left in such a kind of, you know, field of grace because of that. Anyway, I'm talking a lot, but
no, I love this. I think I might know who you're talking about. Are you
Rodrigo?
Yes, the man who created the assemblage for anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, he's a beautiful man. We had, many amazing talks.
Yeah, I'm really imagining that this hardened. I talk a lot about the front body, especially for feminine beings, that there's an edginess to the front of the body of like living life like this, like we're it's protection, it's attack, it's defensiveness, it's like just the process is stripping of thousands and thousands of years of being woman, you know, in that pain body of being sold and raped and killed and murdered and just disrespected. And learning how to ease into the back body and learn how to soften that front body and let it melt into the back body. And I learned this from one of my teachers who talks a lot about this in embodiment practices. Her name's Kendra Kunab. I talk about her all the time. And that served me a lot of seeing how I can move this front forward energy of like, must do more, must learn more, must prove my worth, must be the right one, must be good, and ease it all into the back body where I could just like let go and receive and be in bliss. And it's not so scary to not worry or to not care so much, and to drink the wine and to play with life and to have your heart broken and to try risky, scary things where you pack up your things during quarantine and move to a completely new place and let go. And I'm hearing you talk, I'm feeling a lot of like, that's the embodiment of this practice of not being so on edge, because something that's coming is so glorious and exquisite and beautiful. And we're safe to be in the back body. We're safe to retract all that forward energy.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, you know, it's clearer to me now than ever that, you know, one of my roles as a teacher is to really share that certainty of what's coming, to reassure people, you know, not that they can have my knowing, because my knowing is my knowing, you know, but that everyone inside their cells, I really feel this, like everyone has a place inside that knows, and that knows that the universe is a compassionate, safe place, and that knows there's a reason for everything, and and there's a purpose, and there's a beauty behind everything at its core. And if you can find that place in your everyday life, then yeah, you take the edge off just about everything. Because suddenly life, instead of having these sharp angles, it has soft edges. It has curves and, rounded shapes and ovals and then flow. And it's a lot more romantic and a lot less edgy. Yeah. And I like what you said about the front and the back. I really agree with that. Like, and we have to remember that we have been men and women in our lives countless times. We've been black, white, we've been all races, all genders, all, everything. And so we're all of it. And, our journey is to, through embodying the one we're in now, to also transcend the one we're in now and move into the field behind it. But we only really transcend it by living it fully. That's why the wine is important. You got to drink the wine. One of my teachers, who I never met, would have been, sometimes you kind of think, if there's a person I could meet from history, this would be one of the people I would meet. His name's Hamvas Bella. He's from Hungary. No one's heard of him hardly, except outside of Hungary. He's this forgotten genius. Anyway, one of his great teachers was wine, and he has this wonderful statement at the end of one of his books. Is like, he says, "Drink, and the wine will take care of the rest." And it's kind of literal, but it's also symbolic. He's saying, drink of life, and the kind of the juice of life will just teach you what you need to know. But you can also take it literally. If you happen to love the sensual nectars of life, drink a glass of wine. Eat something fine. Enjoy what life delivers if you can. And not everyone can, because a great number of the people in the world are in poverty. So it's in a way, everyone has to kind of drink of what they can, even if it's a glass of well water. How beautiful that can be, and to appreciate everything that's in front of us. Yeah. I mean, one of the most powerful teachings that I think I mentioned to you is that from the Gene Keys is called the Venus sequence, and you mentioned that Venus deep dive, which is a journey I'm doing in this autumn. And it's a 6-month online virtual retreat. So you live your life for those 6 months, but then over those 6 months, you're going to go on a journey into the gene keys of your Venus sequence. And those are 6 gene keys, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 gene keys and 5 pathways that link them. And each one of them unlocks a part of the kind of story of your heart, the story of your childhood, the story of the wounding of your childhood, your defense strategies, the way your mind protects your heart specifically, and how it shut down at a certain point, and how that pattern as a teenager is kind of still encoded in your body now as a cellular memory, and then going deeper back into our puberty cycle and things and events. You don't even have to know what the events were, because there always are events, whether we remember them consciously or not, they're encoded in the body. There are events that are like, we have to understand there's a pattern, a dynamic pattern of protection that was there to protect us when we felt threatened by some aspect of behavior from someone around us, or the world, or some event, or some culture that we were in, or perhaps even a wound that's deeply in our mother or our father. All of that is passed on to us. And that journey through the Venus sequence takes us step by step back, uncoiling the secrets of our past and taking us right back to the point of birth in our cellular memory, not necessarily our conscious memory, but our cellular memory. And then even beyond birth into conception. And that the final pathway of the Venus sequence is about the journey from conception to birth. Although we go from birth to conception, we do the whole journey in reverse. And what happens is we get to experience the kind of the wounding that is encoded in us, but it's a sacred wound, you know, and we understand that this wounding is sacred because we get to see that inside it is hidden some incredible liberating secret that, you know, and it's our relationships that teach us these secrets. So that's a really, you know, I'm looking forward to that journey, and I'm going to be inviting the world to come on it. So like, and it's be very precious, you know, a very precious journey with a lot of support. But you know, that's a self-study course already available on my website, so people can, if you're interested, and you know, go to my website and look at genekeys.com and start the golden path, which is what you've done, right?
Yes.
Do you want to tell me about your golden path?
Yeah. So
journey?
First off, that all sounds phenomenal. I'm definitely going to do that. I want to do the Venus for sure. It's where as I've been learning in the golden path and my activation sequence, one of my biggest trials in life is emotional. Like, I don't want to use the word turmoil, but just like emotional havoc in relationships. And my emotions go deep. Those I bring into my life, their emotions are deep. Like, emotions is a big thing. And that leads to triggers, and that leads to closures and attachments and anxiety and this and that. So it's also my deepest calling. It's also what I've built my whole business around, is relationships. I can't stop thinking about them. I'm obsessed with them. So I'm very much looking forward to that. The golden path so far for me has been really fascinating. I'm taking it really slow. Trying to do this one differently. I'm going through the Genius, the book, the Genius. There's a PDF that's included with doing the golden path, and it's teaching a lot. And also going through these videos, and I've been really stunned and validated by what I'm reading about me being. So once everyone goes deeper into the golden path, you'll see very similar to human design. We didn't go into that today, but they are like sisters together. They're ish, yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, yeah, they're connected, definitely. Different.
Gene Keys is more feminine. Gene Keys is like how you do your life. Is that how you would say it's different?
Yeah, it's the journey. Yeah.
Journey.
And, yeah.
I think it's a lot more playful. That's one of the reasons I got really deep into teaching human design for a hot minute. And then I half-heartedly backed out. But I think it was more of devotion to what was actually more right. Because for me, there was some hard and fast lines that I didn't feel good with being a projector. Anyways, what I've been loving right now is learning about the gene keys, and then how your specific flavor comes into play with those gene keys. So not to confuse everybody, but there are these things called lines. And in the life's work, I'm a dancer, which is something I'm also contemplating, is how I don't dance like no one's watching, and I dance like people are watching. And feeling into how do I express my devotion as a dancer. Like, what a powerful combination of being a dancing devotee, a gopi of life. And this course for me has been really helpful, because as you know, it's a lot of material. So there's a lot to go into, and I love the structure of taking you through 1, 2, 3, 4 as a starting point, just these 4 really crucial parts of your profile. And like we briefly mentioned earlier, you can find your profile on the Gene Keys website. I will have a link to that in the show notes, so you can just look on iTunes in the little description area and you click on that link to get your profile. But really grateful for you creating this. I have a special link to sign up for the Golden Path for anyone who wants to get rocking and rolling with this, and I highly recommend it as a way to be guided on this very extensive journey in a way where you actually feel held and shown what you need to see in a way that's manageable and not overwhelming. So that's at maddiemoon.com/Gene Keys. And that's one word, Gene Keys. So you can check it out there. I know we're 7 minutes over time. Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just like a couple, like, not like quick fire round questions because they're not like super quick, but a couple things that are coming up for me. Do you have, I won't say a favorite gene key, but one that when you think about it, you just feel all like lit up and excited more than others by any chance?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I guess like you could ask me that question each day and a different answer will come. So I'll tell you today's.
Okay.
Which happens to be where the sun is today, actually. The sun moves through all the keys. Like it takes 6 days to go through a gene key, and then it carries on.
Oh.
It goes through all 64 in the year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No. So today it's in 56. And 56 is the key of intoxication. I guess that's why I was talking about wine.
Yeah.
Talking about wine. But it's about... it's like every key also is a kind of opening into a whole, like it's like all the pantheons of gods, of all the cultures, of all humanity, like the deities, like the deities that are to do with the 56 gene key would be all the kind of the drunken deities, the deities of, whether it's Dionysius or it's like the kind of the really playful, laughing, kind of intoxicated, gods. And I love that. I also have it very strongly in my own profile in what's called the SQ, which is it's really like the deepest flavor of my own heart, actually. Your SQ is your spiritual intelligence that comes out of your heart. So it's really nice to know what that key is.
Mine's provocation.
Is it 39?
Yeah, I'm just not looking.
No, it's liberation.
Liberation, sorry. Yeah, not provocation. Liberation. Yeah, getting stuck in that shadow.
Yeah, no, exactly. You want to use those words, and then
yes,
that's how the gene keys work. Really, they kind of show you like for me, knowing that I am an intoxicate or I'm an intoxicant. That's like and we all are. We're all destined to learn from bliss. From life, from the sensual, from the delights of life, from the birds, the bees, from each other, from the touch of the skin to the whisper of the wind in the trees and the sea, and the sensual delights and the appetites. They're not to be like passed over. They're not to be like left behind. They're to be kind of sampled. But we don't have to also, what I understand of intoxication is it's like you don't have too much. In fact, almost you leave it. You leave it. So if you have a glass of wine, leave a little bit in there. That's the That's the intoxicant's mark. Like that you don't need the whole lot. That you don't need to overdo it, because it's not the drink. It's the experience. It's not the substance. It's the experience that's the key. So you don't need to overdose on anything. You just sample all the delights. And the shadow is just as delightful in its own way as is the city.
What's the shadow of
Well, any shadow. I mean, when I say the shadow, the shadow of that one particularly is distraction. Which means, it shows how you can be distracted through the senses, so you can be distracted from your core purpose through the senses. And we get distracted by pleasures. We get distracted. And that's part of our journey. Like you go down a wormhole, you exhaust your energy, and you come out, you go, I got to get back to myself. That I learned from that, but actually if I do that too much, I'm going to just burn out. It's like, intoxication is about taking in tiny amounts of toxin. And, because the world is like tiny amounts of toxin. And, in some respect, like everything we take in is designed to kind of give us it's an emanation of the divine. and some of them are sweet, and some of them are bitter, and some of them are, there's all these tastes and sensations. It's one of my loves is tea, like fine Chinese teas. And what I've learned about them is sometimes a tea that doesn't taste nice, it can be very powerful. It can have very powerful qi underneath. Right. So there's this one I'm thinking of, like when I give it to people, they're like, whoa, what is that? I say, you got to get past the taste. It's not about taste. Life isn't even about the surface. It's like, what is the energy of this tea? I tell you, when you drink it, even though it tastes like pond water, it's called ancient pond actually. Even though it tastes like pond water, after you've drunk it, you feel clean. I mean, it's weird. Your whole body feels suddenly clean.
Wow.
And you're like, how can something that tastes like that give you the experience of that? That's intoxication. That's like the delights of learning from the physical and the emotional plane and the mental plane. Everything is here for us to learn from. So I'm I'm a lover of the immersive field of of the world, and that's I'm not for like escaping into the ethers. I love the ethers, but like
Yeah.
through the senses, through the physical form, through relationships, through the dirt, through the muck. Get your hands and feet dirty, laugh. If you can't laugh, how are you going to find God?
Oh God, so true. Yeah.
And the intoxicant is the laugher, I have this series I did called, if any of you, I'll finish with this, my last comment, like if anyone's interested in more of this stuff and from the intoxicant side of me, there's a series on my website shop. It's a free series. If you go into shop under courses, I don't really know why it's under courses. It's not really a course. But in there it's called the Ecstatics. It's a 3 or 4 down. It's a free series. You can download them and they're like about an hour long contemplations with beautiful music, in which I contemplate a person who I consider an ecstatic, a kind of divine drunk.
Oh wow, I would love that.
So they're different. Like there's Hafiz, the Sufi poet. There's Walt Whitman, the great American, lover of the sensual. There's Ananda Maima, the great Indian saint.
I was just talking about her the other day.
There's the
I've never
Celtic.
heard of her.
No?
I'd never heard of her until,
Well, if you listen to that Ecstatic, you'll get a really good story of like who she was and what her energy really is. So anyway, that's a lovely series to dive into for people who just want a nice freebie to put them to sleep. I know lots of people that listen to those as they're going to sleep.
Oh, that sounds right up my alley. I'm gonna have I'll have that link in the show notes as well. So easy access.
Anyway, so that's my final little gift, I guess.
Thank you.
And if you got another question, I'm still.
Well, I'm curious what your sun sign is and your moon sign, your rising sign.
Oh, I'm a Virgo.
Oh, sun?
Yeah. My sun?
Yeah.
You mean my sun sign?
No, your sun sign. Not your sun's sign. Yeah.
You're asking my sun sign?
Yes, your sun sign.
Like Virgo?
Yes.
Yeah, so I am a Virgo. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's what I'm asking. Good. That's what I'm asking. Your sun, good. And then I was also asking your moon.
Oh God, I don't know what my moon is.
Oh my God.
I don't really I don't know a lot about astrology, ironically. Okay. Gene Keys is not astrology.
It is ironically, but it's also great because you're in your, know what you're here for.
Yeah. I love hearing from astrologers, but it's not been my journey to learn the depths of it. That.
Do you read books? Are you a book reader?
Sometimes, yeah. Certain books come my way. I tend to, yeah.
And do you ever read fiction?
Sometimes, usually if my wife passes me something that she's really enjoyed, I will read it, and sometimes even something my kids are reading, like if they're really enjoying it, I say, I might get a taste of that, and so I like to touch into, what's going around sometimes. Why, have you got a recommendation?
I do.
Please.
There's this book that I've fallen in love with called Reincarnation Blues.
Oh.
It's about a man who lives 10,000 different lives, and he keeps dying, and every time he dies, he wakes up by the same river, and there's the same two women who are like the angel women, and then there's Death, who he has a love affair with. So every time he dies, he gets to be with Death, and they have sex, they drink wine, they like sleep all day, like it's an actual love affair. And then he goes back, and then he lives a life as like a fisherman who inevitably gets eaten by a shark, and then he dies, and he comes back, and now he's like an ant who lives in the Himalayas. And it's so funny. It
Mm-hmm.
is one of the quirkiest, most clever sci-fi type books I've ever read. And I just, if you're into anything like that, I feel like that book would be up your alley.
Oh, thanks. I love a good book recommendation.
Yeah, Reincarnation Blues. Okay, my very last question for you is do you have like morning or evening rituals that help you get clear and
well, I am a sun worshipper.
That's right. I read about that.
And I mean, I don't worship the sun, but I have a morning practice. It's not really, I'm not fixed on it, but when I feel there's a beautiful sunrise, my body wakes up and says, "Get up, slug a bed, get out there." And I'm like, "It's 5 a.m." But my body wrenches itself up and out, and I have to walk up the road from where I live to get on top of the hill to see the sunrise. So it's a bit of a stretch. But then I learned this technique from a teacher called Bain Saduno, a great master, who's a Bulgarian. And I never met him because he died before I was around, but I immersed myself in his teachings. And I went to Bulgaria several years ago, and I met a lot of his followers. There's still many there. And they all practice meeting the sunrise. And his teachings are so exquisite. And he talks about meeting the first ray, of the sunrise. And the very first ray, you have to be there before sunrise, okay, to get the first ray. And that first ray, as it hits your third eye, it takes you on a journey. It's like you're there, you open yourself to it, and it just takes you on this journey. The journey is usually about 15 minutes. And you stand and you take it in, and then it just kind of, you're gazing at the sun. If you're comfortable directly, depends on, if you're not comfortable, peripheral. And then it just goes through you and it works you, that first ray. And it's almost like it has an intelligence, or it does have an intelligence. And it will go to work inside your being, inside your body, each time in a very different way. But it will open something and unlock something or reveal something. And it's an amazing teaching. So I kind of do a sun yoga, and I also I have a mudra for every of the 64 gene keys. So I often do the mudras with the sun, and they open up different doorways and things. So that's a beautiful practice I do.
Where do we learn the mudras?
They're also on my website in the shop. You can get them. I think I'm just thinking. Yeah, no, I think they're on the shop. They're like, you can get all 64 of them for $30 or something.
Fabulous.
And they're fun to play with, especially when you know your gene keys, because then you can do the ones of your gene keys, and you can explore the other ones, and just whichever one you feel drawn to. And they're wonderful. Some of them are ancient. Others came to me as I was unlocking them with the gene keys. So, but if you understand the gene key and the mudra, if you read the gene key and then do the mudra, it's an embodied understanding of that key, particularly the siddhi, because they're really about the siddhis, the highest fields, because they're the original language before words, the language of the hands, the language of, before we even had words. They're like an angelic language.
Wow, my mind's blown right now. I never there's sign language, and then there's language, right? I wouldn't even think that using the hands really is the original language. It's not when we had words. And mudras, that's beautiful. I really love that idea.
They are. That's why you see the Buddha doing this,
Yeah.
This is the 8th siddhi, this one. This is it's called exquisiteness.
This is exquisiteness.
Exquisiteness. Yeah, because that's what it represents. The Buddha unlocked the secret of the exquisite nature of being, It's so beautiful.
Can I ask what humility is?
That one is 31, and do you know, I can't remember it. The 64, I'm still kind of playing with them myself, so I don't remember that one. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I'll see if I can
I'm
find
going
it
to
on your
now.
site. That's one of my favorite keys right now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll close this out. But there was in the Golden Path, you'll see that there's 64 audios you can listen to, and that's been one of my favorite ways to learn the gene keys. Is just putting on an audio and going for a long walk here in Woodstock in the woods. It's just beautiful. And in that gene key, which the shadow is arrogance, the city is humility. You talked about how Judas from the Bible was so humble. He was willing to let his name forever be tainted by being the betrayer, and how incredibly devotional that actually is. And that for me really stood out to me, of being so humble to be willing to play the role of the bad guy, of the betrayer of the Christ. And that perspective uh, was also pretty playful, I thought. And like, why not see it that way? I feel so good seeing it that way. And I thought that was one of those really interesting lessons that you pulled out of, out of nowhere, what it felt like to me, of how specific that was, but how awe-inspiring that thought was to choose to believe that.
It was it's a playful concept. Like, so rather than saying it, I would say, I think I meant it in the terms of what if.
Yeah.
What if
Yeah.
that was the case? Because
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say that is the case,
No.
but what
No.
if,
Yeah.
and actually from the deepest perspective, I think that's always true. Like, the darkest things serve the light. I realized this in my 3 days. I realized that there is nothing but light. There is nothing but light. And so everything serves the light. Even the darkness serves the light. Because the darkness is just an aspect of the light that, it's the hidden light that it hasn't yet revealed its secret. And so ultimately everything serves that. That's why, when I drop into the depths of the universe, that's what I experience. I experience a being of compassion and gentleness. That's what holds us. And even though sometimes it doesn't seem that way, that's what's underneath everything.
Yeah. I certainly feel that truth.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you so much for coming on to the Mind Body Musings podcast today and sharing all of this profound wisdom and this mythical quest that we each can take individually, and giving us this blueprint to do so. It's outlined, it's clear, and it's also playful, and it's intoxicating. So thank you so much for doing this work and for putting it out there for the world to receive, and helping so many people through this really profound system.
My pleasure, Maddie. It's really lovely, and love to everyone who's watching.
Everyone, we covered a lot of links today. We talked about many different things. So please be sure to go to maddiemoon.com/Richard-Rudd, and that's Rudd with 2 Ds, and you'll get all of the links there. You can also see this interview, watch us talk on YouTube, Maddie Moon TV. And we would love to know any follow-up questions you have, or what your thoughts were, by leaving a comment either on Instagram under the photo of this podcast episode, or on my website, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes if you feel like doing so. And I am so looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the Golden Path for those of you who take the leap into this. Again, that is maddiemoon.com/gene keys, and that's one word. Let us know any questions or comments you have, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the Mind Body Musings podcast.